Contenders handle business over the weekend. Is there any drama left in the division races? Let's talk about it. This is First Pitch. Yes, welcome on into First Pitch for Monday, August 19th, 2024. I'm Lindsay Crosby with Athlon Sports. He's Christian Rauh, managing editor of InsideTheCardinals.com. And Christian, what a weekend of games across Major League Baseball. Just a loaded schedule. And I think the big kind of takeaway here is everybody kind of did the same thing, right? In almost every situation, the teams that needed to win won. If a team lost, the team they're racing with also lost. And so really kind of, it feels like we have a logjam here. I'm going to start in the West because usually everybody starts in the East and goes East to West. Let's back it up a little bit. The Houston Astros win the series against the Chicago White Sox 2-1, which is what you expect them to do, right? But the flip side of this, the Seattle Mariners drop their series against the Pirates.
Yeah.
So it's only, confirming here, it's only a 4-game lead in the division, but it feels like that's almost insurmountable for the Seattle Mariners, right?
It does. No, it really does, especially because for the most part, the pitching's been pretty good for Seattle. As we mentioned last week, the bats are just still not there. And yeah, you just can't lose those kind of games in close games that Seattle's been doing over the past week, but this past weekend, definitely. So yeah, the inevitable is happening, Lindsay. We are in the thick of it, and we are in the Houston Astros. Are we even to the point to where we're just like assuming that the Astros are going to win the division, but not only the division, we're going to see them back in the World Series? Like, are we already at that point?
I think the whole how deep they go in the playoffs probably depends on Kyle Tucker, right? Like, when do they get Kyle Tucker back? We know he's doing some physical activity. This is the worst shin injury in the history of shin injuries. I mean, they have reinforcements. Verlander's tentatively expected to come off the IL this week. I think this is something where I expect them to win the division. I expect them to make the postseason. I expect them to make a run towards the ALCS again. Now, whether or not they make it, I think depends on how effective Verlander is when he comes back and when they get Kyle Tucker. Do they get Kyle Tucker back in September where he has time to get back into form before the postseason? Or do they get him back literally the first time we see him is on a postseason roster? Because obviously then you have the issue of you don't have minor league rehab games. Those seasons are going to start to wrap up in the next couple weeks.
Yeah.
You know, and so like I think that's probably the determining factors as to how far they go, but it definitely feels like the Astros are 9-1 their last 10 games. They go to Boston this week, whereas they host Boston this week, whereas the Mariners go to LA to play the Dodgers. Kind of feels like this one is over.
Kyle Tucker, I finally have some optimistic views for Kyle Tucker because I finally got to see him in the batter's box. They showed him taking some batting practice this weekend. It was Players Weekend. So one of the things that they missed out this year is they didn't put the nicknames on the back of jerseys. But if they had it this year, Kyle Tucker needs to have Loch Ness Monster on the back because we finally got a sighting of him. It finally happened. So I'm excited to see what we see from Kyle Tucker when he does come back. But he's not the only injury concern, Lindsay. Alex Bregman did not play this entire weekend because of elbow inflammation. So that's something that needs to be looked at in a close eye as well. He seemed to think it wasn't a big concern. I like that he took the media into his own hands and had a press conference for himself because he's a pending free agent next year. So I like that he did that for himself, controlled the narrative for himself. But that's a big deal as well. Yes, getting Verlander back's huge, but if you don't have Bregman, who's been arguably one of their hottest hitters other than Jordan Alvarez, that could also be huge. But I still think the Astros are going to be the team to beat in the AL West. Like I'm almost as close to saying that it's already over. Not as close as saying what the NL Central is, but the AL West is that dang close to being already over.
You know why I didn't even think about Bregman in that game? Did you see the lineup that they threw out for Game 3? It was Jose Altuve as the DH.
Oh, that's
Jake
right. Yeah.
Myers in center field, Shea Whitcomb at first, Zach DeZenzo at first, Chas McCormick in left, Pedro Leon in right. Like, Jordan got the day off. Bregman didn't play. It was the only regulars in there were Altuve, Jeremy Pena, and Yanya Diaz. And again, Altuve was DH, and they still won. Now, granted, it was the Chicago White Sox, but like they still won that game despite rolling out what looked like a spring training lineup when I saw it. Like, I honestly was like, "Is this spring training? Is this? Are we out in Arizona right now?" So that's why I guess I didn't think about Bregman being out, and why I'm not necessarily concerned that they're not going to be able to maintain this. But yeah, I'm with you. I have this done. I have this in the bag. I feel like probably one of the safer bets you can get is the Astros to win the West. You probably won't get a lot of value on that either if you were a betting person.
Yeah, he's your Framber Valdez has to be like your game one everything in the playoffs, World Series, ALCS, wherever you get, because he has been the best pitcher for that team and probably the only consistent pitcher from the beginning of the year until right now. So again, with the weird lineup that they had
Mhm.
on Sunday, you still get 7 scoreless innings from Framber Valdez after coming off of a start that he just missed a no hitter by an out. So
Yeah,
you got to love what Valdez is doing for this Astros squad.
absolutely. All right. Talking about folks handling business, we're going to stick out west. The Los Angeles Dodgers. They handled their business against St. Louis, but the San Diego Padres dropped their series to the Colorado Rockies. They won the middle game, but they dropped games 1 and 3, including a 3-2 loss on Sunday. You've kind of been high on LA not winning this division, and you like
Yeah.
to say that Arizona was going to win it. I believe Arizona got swept by Tampa Bay, including 2 walk-offs in 3 games. Is this still? Is it still a question whether or not the Dodgers win this division?
Yeah. Which team do we not want to win the divisions moving forward, Lindsay? Because if so, then I'll tell them I want them to win it. So you're a Braves fan. Do you want me to say the Philadelphia Phillies are going to win? Is that next thing we need to do? Because it seems like everything that I say on this show, the teams turn me into liars. But lately, that seems to be the case. But yeah, I thought Arizona was on a hot streak, and so was San Diego. But they were. They were what, 9-1 heading into the weekend. They
Yep.
both finally, they met. They were due, and it happened. Falling to Colorado is not something that you expect. 2 games to 1, and then Arizona getting swept by Tampa Bay was something I did not have on
No.
my bingo card, and it ended on Sunday with a walk off from Dylan Carlson, going to extra innings. Arizona didn't look terrible in that series though. I tuned in as much as I could to that series because I was really wondering why
Mhm.
this team is losing 3 games in a row, and it was just Tampa just came to play in my
Yeah.
mind. But when you look at this division, Los Angeles is up 3 games now. It's 3 games. We're still in the wild, wild west. 3 games is not going to be enough in this division because I haven't had the schedule up in front of me, but how many times does the Padres still play the Dodgers? How many times the Diamondbacks still play? There's definitely got to be a few.
They have 3 games against the Padres, 4 against the Diamondbacks still. So
That's a lot.
they yeah, like their lead isn't any bigger than the number of games they play those teams left. And obviously, if you lose to the Padres, that counts double in the standings because you go up a game or you go down a game, they go up a game. So LA does have the 24th easiest schedule remaining. That's weird to say it, word it like that, but it's 24th out of 30 teams in difficulty down the stretch. And that's probably with Seattle being in the tough category when it probably should not be in the tough category. But like they've got 4 against Atlanta
Yeah.
still. They've got Baltimore for 3. They have the Guardians for 3. And so, like, other than that, they get 6 against the Rockies. They get the Marlins for 3, the Angels, the Cubs. Well, San Diego right there at 16. Arizona is the 7th hardest schedule remaining. So I think the Dodgers have the inside track, and it's just a matter now of handle your business and what happens in those 2 divisional matchups between now and the end of the year.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna stop making predictions until we get to the playoffs, Lindsay. But when you when you look at this NL West, the Dodgers obviously have the lead, and you mentioned they're on a good track. It's not going to hurt them any way, shape, or form that they're also getting Max Muncy back this week. They're also getting Tommy Edman back this week, so that's going to help them out as well. When's Muncy? When's Edman come back? I remember you mentioned you talked about this weekend. I think it's Monday. I think today we get Muncy back, right?
I think we get I want to say we get Edman back first, and then we get Muncy. I could have that backwards, but yeah, both of them are scheduled back this week. And
in the
so, one,
series.
I'm curious about what the roster moves are that you make. They've signaled Edmonds probably going to play a lot of center field. So is Andy Pages get option down? Where do you make a move there? And then who moves for Muncy? And how does you already got rid of Rosario? Not a lot of low hanging fruit left on these roster moves to make. So who moves on to make room for these two guys?
Yeah, that roster crunch in LA is crazy. We just saw Rosario go to the Reds on a waiver claim. Freddie Freeman, he was out for the last 2 days for an injury, but it looked like that injury is not going to require an IL stint. But if that was the case, that would make the Max Muncy
Yeah,
addition a lot easier for them, at least for the short term. So yeah,
and
definitely a lot of things
better
to
for
keep
him
in mind.
defensively because Muncy is not a good defender. Put him at first
That's
base,
true.
it's not bad, but you don't have DH open, you don't have first base open. If Freeman comes back, it's like, do you put him at second? Do you put him at third? Either way, you're taking a defensive hit to get Muncy on the field and probably a batting average hit too.
100%.
Okay, let's go from the west to the east. The AL East race, a little bit interesting. The Yankees actually didn't handle their business over the weekend against Detroit. They only won one of the 3 games. They lose a series 2-1 to Detroit, including Sunday night, the Little League game played in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. Lots of fun video and things coming out of this game. The Yankees riding the bus with the kids to the ballpark. Jazz Chisholm, who was throwing before the game, was doing some defensive drills, but did not play with that UCL injury in his non-throwing arm. Spent almost the entire game in the stands, sitting with the kids, kind of hanging out there. So that was really cool. But Detroit does walk it off 3-2. And this division now, you're in a situation where, they're still neck and neck. Baltimore, New York, 73-52. Each team is 5-5 in their last 10 games. Who wins the AL East? Or does it really even matter because the loser is going to be the first wild card anyway?
Yeah, you just asked me for a prediction, Lindsay. Do you remember what I said 3 minutes ago? Come on, man. Come on. I know it's Monday, but we can't have that good of short-term memory.
I need more coffee.
No, I think you're right with the portion of it doesn't matter because both these teams are going to be in the postseason. But hey, let's not sleep on the Boston Red Sox. I'm just going to say that out loud since we're talking AL East. They had a good series against Baltimore this weekend. And although their pitching staff is still a little shaky, Byron Bello didn't make that look shaky at all this weekend. He threw a no-hitter into the 7th inning. But enough about the Red Sox. Let's get back to those Yankees. Meadows gets a walk-off double or walk-off single to win the game. Jason Dominguez, as much as we were advocating for him to come back up and stay, he's the 27th man yesterday. He goes back to the minors, but he was one of the biggest reasons why they lost that game. He double clutched a throw to home plate. The throw was off. You gotta make those throws, man, especially when you have your moment to get back in the majors. I'm still shocked that they bat him 5th. And they're like, oh, by the way, we're going to send you right back down to the minors. Like, there's a reason you bat 5th, Jason Dominguez, and then you just don't put him there. Regardless, when you look at this AL East, I think this is the most exciting division that we are going to see down the stretch. Who makes it, who wins the division, because I think it's going to come down to you're either going to be the top wildcard team or you're going to be, one of the teams that have a bye week, which could come into play come in the postseason. Because last year, maybe it does matter, Lindsay, because last year we had 2 wildcard teams make the World Series. So maybe it's not in the team's favor to win the AL East because you don't want to have that whole week off in the postseason.
If I remember right from the Braves narratives, 3 of the 4 teams with a bye lost in their first round matchup. The exception, obviously, the Houston Astros, who made the ALCS because the Houston Astros are inevitable. I do think for Jason Dominguez, there is a little bit of one. He never had great arm strength before, and he's coming off a Tommy John. So, I wouldn't have expected him to make that throw in the first place. Honestly, for that throw to be successful and get the out. But also people who I saw some of this online. People who seized on Jason Dominguez not having a great game as evidence that he should be in the minors and he shouldn't be at the major league level. Have I got news for y'all on Alex Verdugo? If you can point to a bad game and say this dude shouldn't be here, Doogie's got a lot of those. And I still maintain, despite how that went yesterday, I still maintain that Dominguez, I think, would do better than Verdugo on an everyday basis. Obviously, them picking him as a 27th man, it's probably a way to signal they're not happy with Verdugo, but not make a roster move where they could potentially either have to bench or lose Verdugo if they have to DFA him or put him on waivers or something like that. So I I think Dominguez needs to be up. I think you kind of can't use that one game to be like, hey,
For
you know,
sure.
you don't need to be up. But yeah, it was not a great way to make the case that you needed to be promoted back to the majors by Jason Dominguez. But I'm going to give the kid some grace because again, first major league action since Tommy John surgery.
You can expect to have those kind of games, but you know the sample size, or you know what you're getting from Alex Verdugo. He's a veteran, but this is a small sample size from, as you mentioned, a returning Tommy John guy, as in Jason Dominguez. So I'm
Yeah.
with you. I'm sure we're going to see him back. He's going to be one of the guys for September call-ups. Last thing about the Yankees and Orioles before you move on here to quick pitch. Who's in worse situation? I know this is on the rundown, but I'm going to give it to you. Who is in the worst situation? The Orioles with Craig Kimbrell as their closer, or the Yankees with Clay Holmes as their closer, who has his 10th blown save of the season, most in MLB?
That's a good question. I think I'm going to go with the Yankees simply because you feel like there's other arms in Baltimore. And the Yankees are just in a situation where this is something I feel like they've never really fixed, right? They've been trying to figure out the closer for it feels like seasons now. And I'm honestly surprised they didn't do more to try to get some sort of guy at the trade deadline. Honestly,
Yeah.
for me, yeah, I'm going to go with the Yankees. I have more faith in Craig Kimbrell maybe figuring out and getting hot in October than I do Clay Holmes.
Clay Holmes' 10 blown saves are the most for a Yankees reliever since 1987.
Wow. Gee, what a stat. Golly. All right. Let's stick in the AL East real quick. We get into quick pitch. First segment, our little minor league update. 2 prospect promotions over the weekend. Kristen Campbell got promoted to AAA Worcester by the Red Sox. Trey Morgan, the first baseman, got promoted to AA Montgomery by the Tampa Bay Rays. So now these are the clusters of talent in these respective organizations for the Red Sox. He joins catcher Kyle Teal. He joins shortstop Marcelo Meyer, outfielder Roman Anthony, as far as the prospects that are there. And then former major leaguers who are in Worcester with the Red Sox. Vaughn Grissom, Bobby Dahlbeck. Tristan Cassis just went up to the majors. He was just reactivated, but he was there for rehab. And then pitching-wise, Brad Keller is there. Rich Hill just signed, and he's there. Liam Hendricks is there. So impressive lineup in AAA Worcester, right?
Yeah.
But then you look at the Tampa Bay Rays. Catcher Dominic Keegan, shortstop Carson Williams, who people who are, know I'm a big fan of his. First baseman Xavier Isaac, Trey Morgan joins him. Outfielder Chandler Simpson, one of the highest stolen base totals in all of baseball. And then a couple promising pitchers, Yonio Corrette, Logan Workman. Which of these rosters do you think has more prospect talent and we see more future major leaguers out of?
Ooh, man, I'm leaning towards it's tough. I'm leaning towards Boston, the Woo Sox, only because that they're just one level ahead. But when you just said who we're gonna get most major leaguers out of, that made me take a step back and think about it. But I'm gonna lean towards the Woo Sox here because of the amount of talent that they have with the 3 they just called up last week with Teal and Mayer and Anthony, and then they just go ahead and get Campbell up the last few days as well. So go ahead and give me that one. I think that the Woo Sox are like must watch baseball if you're a fan of minor league baseball, because you are seeing the future. And what Boston has done this year, what they have done, it surprised people to even be in the playoff contention, because I didn't have them even remotely close this year. I had them, I think I projected them, which I'm really good at predicting, by the way, to have the Red Sox, I think, at the bottom of the division.
Right.
So give me the Woo Sox, and I got a feeling you're going to say the opposite.
I am, and it's not because I called a week of Biscuits games last year. It's just because I'm a believer in some of this talent. Carson Williams, 15 home runs, 29 stolen bases. I think he's the best defensive shortstop in the minors. I
Ooh.
think that he could be a 20-30 guy at the major league level, a little bit of development. He could be a 30-30 guy, I think, at the major league level at shortstop, which is obviously incredibly rare. Xavier Isaac, amazing power bat. Trey Morgan is a fantastic contact and defense guy at first base. Dominic Keegan, I'm really high on as one of my sleeper better catchers in the minors. And then Chandler Simpson has some work to do as far as consistency of contact and things like that. But incredibly fast, blazing center fielder, tons of speed, has stolen tons of bases. I feel like you're going to see plenty of major leaguers out of the Woo Sox, right? Guys who make it up. And I do think Roman Anthony is one of the better outfielders in minor league baseball. But I really do love just this collection of guys that the Biscuits have. And I think that that's the core of the next really, really good Tampa Bay Rays team. And the question is going to be, when in 2025 do a lot of these players make the majors? Because I think that's probably the big question we're facing here is when do we get these guys up?
Is there a room? Is there a spot for everyone that we're mentioning on the Red Sox roster right now? And then there's there a room for the Rays roster right now. The Rays are kind of in a rebuilding spot, so it looks like they will have more of an idea of getting these players up. Now you mentioned
Right.
Montgomery's in Double A right now, so there's a little
Yeah.
bit more time for these guys to marinate. But when you're talking about the Woo Sox, we're talking about Triple A guys that they moved up. That means you're obviously trying to prepare them be ready for 2025 opening day. Do you think that there's a clear spot for McGuire, for Meyer, for Anthony, and for possibly Campbell even to find a spot on the 2025 opening day roster?
I think Campbell's probably the toughest one to fit, right? But Kyle Teal, I mean, there's, you always need two catchers, and the second catcher is usually never a great catcher. I do think you can find a spot for him. Shortstop's been an issue all year. Trevor Story may be back,
Right.
before the season ends. But Marcelo Meyer, they've had troubles at both shortstop and second base. So you can find a spot for Marcelo Meyer if you want to. Roman Anthony, there's always room for an incredibly talented outfielder. I think he could go into right field. He's got an arm. He's got the power. I think you would find a spot for him, although you do have a logjam right now. You can always make moves over the winter. Tampa Bay, it feels like it's a little bit easier, right? You don't have a long-term plan at shortstop because your last long-term plan got arrested. Um, first base, Yandy Diaz is an older player. Catcher, you haven't really had a standout catcher in a while. You had 1 year of great power production from Mike Zunino, but even then he batted, I think, under 200 that season. And then outfield, feels like there's always a million outfielders in Tampa Bay. But you've moved on from some of them, right? You sent Randy
Right.
Rosarena out to Seattle. So I feel like it's easier to see the fit in Tampa Bay. And I'll remind you, Junior Caminero last year was promoted from Double A straight to the majors. Now he spent almost the entire year at Double A, but he went from Double A straight to the bigs last year, and then went back to Triple A this year before he came up. So they're not afraid to call up straight from Double A. A couple of organizations will do that. Atlanta does that too. They'll call guys up straight from Double A if they have to.
Good
All
point.
right.
Good point.
Moving on a little bit here in quick pitch. Players Weekend, you touched on it earlier. No special jerseys, but we had the bats, we had the cleats. What was your favorite bat or cleat from Players Weekend?
Oh man, my dad came out when I saw Bryce Harper's bat when he had his bat that was colored and written on by his kids that he used out during the weekend. That was
Nice.
probably my favorite one. But the nerdy ones of me, oh man, Bobby Witt Jr. using Pablo Sanchez from Backyard Baseball, that bat, that's probably my absolute favorite one out of the nerdy side. So those two, give me those two.
That was a really good one. I'll do that as one of my two. And then my other one, and this feels like cheating, but Michael Harris II had a Toy Story themed bat. And then
Nice.
one of the games, so the bat was designed like Woody. It looked like the character Woody. And then his cleats in that same game, one of the cleats was Woody, one of the cleats was Buzz Lightyear. And I'm like, that's a fun way to put them together. And then Vinny Pasquantino had a bat that was in honor of this school charity that he works with, providing school supplies for kids. And I noticed my wife pointed that out. She saw a lot of crayon bats, pencil bats, a lot of school themed bats. And I said, well, one, Those are easy things to make into bats. But then two, you kind of have that. I didn't see a lot of lightsaber bats. I'm a little
No.
disappointed. I did see, I think, one lightsaber bat that was supposedly a glow in the dark one. I didn't see very many lightsaber bats. So I think we need to work on that, people. What are we doing here? Like,
Yeah,
what is
more
going
Star
on
Wars
with
themes with that. Yeah, we could have had you could have had a stormtrooper looking bat. You could have had lightsabers. There's plenty of things you could in Star Wars. I agree with you. But I love the Vinny Pasquantino shout out, getting some little Old Dominion on this podcast. That's what I'm talking about.
I'm a big Vinny P guy. Okay, so moving on a little bit. Kansas City Royals get the sweep over the Cincinnati Reds. Dairon Blanco, 3 home runs on the weekend. Kind of using this to segue into the AL Central. I've maintained for a while, I thought the Royals were going to make a push and win this division. They're 6-4 in the last 10. They are 3 games back, and they are holding on to the final wildcard spot in the Central. It's the Twins, the Royals, and the loser of Yankees Orioles. Can the Guardians, 5-5 in their last 10, 2 games up on Minnesota, 3 on Kansas City. Can the Guardians hold on to win the AL Central? Or is this going to be a wide open race down the stretch?
Wide open. This is gonna be wide open, Lindsay. And you mentioned Blanco, by the way. I got to give him his flowers. Not only did he have 3 home runs, he had 8 RBIs over the weekend. He was killing it. 7 of them, 7 RBIs came on Saturday. So yeah, he just had one
Wasn't that out
heck.
of like the 9 spot or something? Like it was like a record for RBI out of the 9 spot in a single game or something like that?
There was some sort of record. I know that the 7 RBIs were the most all season by any player in the league. I know that. But yeah, he was definitely doing some really impressive stuff with the bat. But when you
And
look at these,
yellow brown bat.
oh, you're right, it was. Look at that. See? So gotta love that. The 3 teams in the AL Central, I think is going. I talk about how the AL East is going to be one of the tightest races. This one's going to be just as exciting as well. I do think eventually we're going to see one, you know, fall off a little bit where they're battling to get themselves into the wild card
Mhm.
race. I think we're going to see one of these teams fall outside those 3 final spots in the wild card. I'm not going to predict who, Lindsay. I think we're at that point in this show, but what I will say is I am really impressed with the Minnesota Twins. Very impressed with the Minnesota Twins over the last couple weeks, and I would not be shocked to see them at the end of the week being in the AL Central lead. Would not be shocked.
Yeah, I kind of wrote them off a couple weeks ago, and I think it was a little premature. Looking at the matchups they have: Guardians at Yankees, Twins at Padres, Royals home versus the Angels. But the hard part for me predicting them to win the division, they have the second hardest schedule down the stretch. They got Atlanta for 3, Houston for 4, the Yankees for 3, the Phillies for 3, 3 against the Twins, and 7 against the Guardians. So pretty hard schedule down the stretch. We'll see what happens there. Last thing here, it is the absolute final battle of the Bay. How sad is it that we are like the Giants are making their final trip? Or I'm sorry, it's the final Bay Bridge series, officially is what it's called with the Giants and the A's. How sad is it that we're losing this rivalry in baseball?
Yeah, I don't know if this rivalry is ever going to be the same once they move to Sacramento or Vegas or Mars or wherever the Athletics move to. But yeah, it was definitely a bittersweet moment this weekend when the 2 teams played, and it turned out to be a really fantastic series. It turned out to be one of a really great ending as well. But I think the biggest thing that got me was one, Matt Chapman. He's played on both sides of this rivalry. He was with Oakland for a long time, then with San Francisco. I thought it was really cool that he asked for a third base bag by the Oakland A's and they gave him one. So I thought that
Yeah,
was really neat that you get to have that. And then I saw a video of once the game was over, there was a huge line of fans. They had 35,000 fans at the Coliseum over the weekend, like in on Saturday and Sunday. That's the most
yeah,
they've had all season long, but they brought fans down on the field to walk the bases for the final time. As a baseball fan,
yeah.
I'm not an Oakland fan, but as a baseball fan, you got that feels knowing that you're losing something that's been in your city for a very long time. It's taking a piece away from you. Baseball is a big part of what people do in the summertime with their family and things like that. So definitely a bittersweet moment. I hope that they can find a way to rekindle this rivalry in any way, shape, or form once the Athletics decide where they're going to finally sit. But it's never going to be the same, Lindsay.
Honestly, they need to sell the team to somebody who can keep them in Oakland because I think there was a route to keep them there. if John Fisher wanted to and he just didn't want to. Anyway, uh, that is First Pitch for Monday, August 19th. If you're listening on audio, do us a favor, leave us a 5-star review. We had a couple of those coming over the weekend. Thank you so much for those. It really does help people find the show and give some legitimacy to what we're doing here. If you're watching on YouTube, do us a favor, subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment, notification bell so you know when we drop a new show, which is every single weekday, usually around 10 a.m. Eastern. Until next time, this has been First Pitch.